How to become so genius it feels illegal. The inner formula that unlocks true genius. What if genius was never about being gifted, but about being deeply awake? Leonardo da Vinci's story isn't just a tale of brilliance. It's a mirror for every one of us searching for meaning in a chaotic world. This video will take you beneath the surface of Leonardo's mind, his rituals, his philosophy, and how his way of seeing can ignite your own clarity and purpose. If you've ever felt too deep, too slow, or too sensitive for the modern world, this is for you. Stay with me because we're about to uncover why your way of being isn't a flaw. It's a different kind of strength. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop reaching for more and start returning to yourself. Genius is not a gift from heaven, but a journey of inner awakening. Leonardo da Vinci is often remembered as a man touched by the divine, a genius whose brilliance was beyond comprehension. But the truth is far more human and far more powerful. What made Leonardo exceptional was not just his talent, but his relentless pursuit of understanding. He was not born with all the answers. He simply never stopped asking questions. From the movement of dragonfly wings to the anatomy of the human body, from the physics of light to the subtle expressions of emotion on a human face, Leonardo's life was shaped by an unstoppable curiosity. This curiosity was not magic. It was a choice, a discipline, an act of defiance against the ordinary. While others accepted what they saw, he questioned everything. And in that act of questioning, he uncovered not only how the world worked, but how to see it differently. Society often teaches us that only a few are meant to think deeply, to observe intensely, to care that much. But that is a lie. The potential to become extraordinary does not belong to the gifted. It belongs to the awake. Leonardo's story is not just about brilliance, it is about presence. He lived in deep awareness of what surrounded him. Every small observation was a path inward. He was not running from the world, but moving into it with radical attention. In a time when many feel disconnected from meaning, chasing achievements that feel hollow, his life reminds us that depth is still possible. We can choose to live fully. We can choose to see, to feel, to be awake. Genius in its truest form is not a label. It is a relationship with life. It is the courage to slow down, to listen, and to engage with mystery. Leonardo da Vinci was not born with all the light. He simply learned how to open his eyes. And that too is a practice we can learn. A new kind of intelligence begins the moment we stop numbing ourselves and start paying attention. The genius within is not asleep. It is simply waiting to be invited back into the light. Look deeper, for what's truly precious is often overlooked. Leonardo da Vinci saw what others could not because he was born with superior eyes, but because he trained himself to observe without rushing. He once described a game where a person draws a line on a wall and others guess its length. This exercise might seem simple, even childish. But for Leonardo, it was a method, a way to sharpen attention, a way to learn how to see. He believed the mind could be taught to perceive what is usually missed. That training the eye was the beginning of training the soul. In today's world, we are surrounded by distractions. Speed is praised. Multitasking is glorified. In this chaos, the ability to observe with care is mistaken for passivity or even weakness. But looking deeply is not weakness. It is power. Leonardo noticed the way water swirls into a bowl, how facial muscles betray emotion, how dragonfly wings move out of sync. His genius was not in collecting rare facts, but in giving full presence to what most people ignored. This is not just about intelligence. It is about compassion. When we truly observe, we begin to understand, and understanding dissolves judgment. It brings us closer to others and to ourselves. There is a deep kind of healing in observation, to watch without rushing, to witness without forcing. In Leonardo's time, this act of attention helped him create art that felt alive. In ours, it helps us reconnect with the present moment. Observation is not simply about studying the world. It is about remembering that we are a part of it. When we begin to look with care, the world responds. It reveals things we have forgotten how to see. And those things, though quiet, have the power to shift us. We often believe that meaning must be searched for in grand events or achievements. But Leonardo found it in shadows, in smiles, in wings. The ordinary is not empty. It is overflowing. The key is not to run faster, but to return to the moment. To breathe, to witness, because the most precious truths do not shout. They wait to be noticed. They wait for someone who is finally willing to look. Slow down to gain clarity when stillness gives birth to breakthroughs. While painting The Last Supper, Leonardo da Vinci would often stand before the wall for an hour, motionless without lifting a brush. Then he would make a single stroke and walk away. To some, this might have seemed like procrastination. But Leonardo understood something few people do. The mind needs silence to speak clearly. He knew that creation was not always about doing more, but about giving space for intuition to emerge. He honored the invisible work that happens when we appear to be doing nothing. This was not delay, it was depth. In a world that celebrates urgency and productivity, it is easy to confuse movement with progress. We rush through tasks, fill every moment, and expect insight to arrive on command. But wisdom has its own rhythm. Creativity cannot be forced. It requires stillness, reflection, and time. Leonardo's genius was not just in his skill, but in his patience. He gave himself permission to wait, and in that waiting, he allowed ideas to ripen. This kind of stillness is not idle. It is active listening. When we slow down, we begin to hear what we have been too busy to notice. Our thoughts settle, emotions rise, hidden truths surface. This process can be uncomfortable. Stillness reveals what motion hides. But it is in this discomfort that healing begins. We learn to sit with our confusion. We learn to hear the whispers beneath the noise. Modern research now confirms what Leonardo practiced. Boredom, when approached consciously, can increase divergent thinking and creativity. When we are not constantly occupied, the mind begins to wander to connect ideas in unexpected ways. This is not a waste of time. It is the birthplace of insight. The moments we think are empty are often the ones where transformation begins. It is in stillness that the soul catches up with the body. There is a reason we fear silence. It makes us face ourselves, but there is also freedom in it. When we learn to be still, we reclaim the parts of ourselves that have been buried under noise. Leonardo da Vinci did not wait because he was lost. He waited because he was listening. In that pause, he found clarity. And through that clarity, he created work that continues to move people centuries later. Stillness is not absence. It is presence. It is the willingness to stop performing and start listening. When we choose to slow down, we are not stepping away from life. We are stepping into it fully awake. And in that space, something extraordinary begins to unfold. The body knows the way when the mind awakens, only when the body is set free. Leonardo da Vinci was not only a brilliant thinker, but also a man of remarkable physical strength and vitality. In his time, he was known as the strongest man in Florence, capable of bending horseshoes with his bare hands. He trained in fencing, horsemanship, hiking, and often impressed his guests not only with his intellect, but with his athleticism. To many, this might seem like an unrelated detail in the story of a genius, but Leonardo knew something essential. The mind does not exist apart from the body. They are one system, and when the body is alive, the mind follows. He walked for hours, hiked through the countryside, and remained active well into old age. These were not habits of restlessness. They were expressions of vitality. His creativity did not bloom in confinement, but in movement. Today, modern neuroscience confirms what Leonardo intuitively practiced. Physical activity enhances cognitive flexibility, helps regulate emotions, reduces mental fatigue, and opens up space for new ideas to form. The brain is not isolated. It is carried and nourished by the body. The more we ignore this, the more disconnected we become from clarity. In a world where so many people feel stuck inside their heads, disconnected from their feelings, and overwhelmed by stress, Leonardo's way of life reminds us of a truth we often forget. Healing does not begin in thought. It begins in breath, in movement. In reconnecting with the intelligence of the body, we are taught to chase success by pushing the mind harder, by forcing our thoughts into place. But the mind is not a machine to be controlled. It is a garden to be tended, and the body is its soil. There is wisdom stored in our muscles, in the rhythm of our steps, in the lungs, that expand and contract without instruction. When we move, we are not escaping life. We are returning to it. Leonardo did not separate his intellect from his body. He used the strength of one to empower the other. This integration made him not only more productive, but more fully alive. To set the mind free, we must first free the body. We must walk, stretch, breathe, and listen, not as a task, but as a return, as a way back into wholeness. Leonardo's genius was not suspended in the clouds. It was grounded, embodied, and deeply connected to the physical world. His clarity did not descend from above. It rose from the earth beneath his feet. When art and science are no longer two separate halves, Leonardo da Vinci once wrote that to develop a complete mind, one must study the art of science and the science of art. In this single line, he revealed the foundation of his genius. While most people divided disciplines into neat categories, Leonardo saw them as one living system. Anatomy was not separate from painting. Geometry was not apart from beauty. Observation was not distinct from emotion. He understood that reality is not fragmented but woven, and to see clearly we must stop tearing things apart. This mindset gave Leonardo an extraordinary ability to innovate. He brought artistic intuition into scientific sketches. He infused technical precision into his artworks. The famous Mona Lisa is not only a portrait, it is a fusion of emotion and mathematics, light and biology, proportion and feeling. Her mysterious smile was not just imagined. It was engineered through an understanding of facial muscles and optical science. For Leonardo, beauty was never shallow. It was the visible surface of invisible truths. Modern life often teaches us to choose between logic and emotion, between creativity and structure. But this split is artificial. True intelligence holds opposites together. It allows reason to embrace mystery and structure to dance with imagination. Leonardo was not trapped in either world. He walked freely between them, finding unity where others saw conflict. His mind did not compartmentalize, it connected. This integration is not only intellectually powerful, it is deeply healing. Many people live in internal conflict, believing they must choose who to be. But we are not made of parts that must compete. We are made of opposites that long to be reconciled. Healing happens when the artist inside us meets the scientist, when the heart is allowed to think and the mind is allowed to feel. Leonardo lived this truth. He did not balance extremes, he fused them. We often mistake complexity for confusion, but Leonardo's complexity was harmonious. It reflected the universe itself, full of tension and symmetry, chaos and design. To live fully is to accept the whole, to be both structured and soft rational and wild knowing and open. When art and science no longer oppose each other, we begin to see not only the world more clearly, but ourselves. Write it down to avoid getting lost, the journal of an awakened mind. Leonardo da Vinci carried a notebook with him almost everywhere. It was not a casual habit. It was a core practice of his life. He filled his pages with questions, sketches, observations, measurements, inventions, and reflections. His mind was in constant motion, and his notebook became a place where that motion could take shape. It was a mirror of his curiosity, a container for the chaos of inspiration. In these pages, the internal world found structure, and fleeting thoughts became foundations for deeper insight. Many people today think of journaling as a nostalgic or emotional act, but Leonardo's approach was different. He wrote to remember, to investigate, to test, to make sense of complexity. His to-do lists were unlike anyone else's. They included tasks like study the tongue of a woodpecker, observe the placement of mortar in military fortifications, dissect a human skull. He did not write about what he had already done. He wrote about what he wanted to understand. His notebooks were not records. They were invitations, a map not of what was known, but of what was yet to be discovered. Writing down our thoughts is not just about memory. It is about presence. In a world where our attention is constantly being pulled outward, journaling draws us back inward. It forces us to slow down, to listen, to ask real questions. What am I feeling? What do I need? What do I believe? These simple questions can open the door to transformation. When left unspoken, our thoughts become clutter. When written, they become clarity. Journaling is not a retreat from life. It is a way of engaging with it more deeply. Leonardo's genius was not born in isolation. It was cultivated through intention. His notebook was a bridge between the seen and unseen, the conscious and the unknown. It allowed him to return to his ideas, revise them, and carry them forward. In that process, his thinking matured. His questions evolved. His insights expanded. Writing was not a task for him. It was a ritual, a quiet act of devotion to his own awakening. Today, we often search for answers outside ourselves. But Leonardo reminds us that some of the most profound answers are already within. We simply need to make space for them to surface. The journal is one of the oldest and most powerful tools for self-inquiry. And like Leonardo, we too can write not just to remember, but to become. You don't need to be a genius. You just need to learn to look within. It is easy to place Leonardo da Vinci on a pedestal, to believe that his brilliance came from a place beyond reach. We imagine he was born with something rare, something we lack. But the truth is more empowering. What made Leonardo extraordinary was not only his gifts, but the way he lived. He was present. He paid attention. He followed his curiosity and honored his inner voice. These are not divine traits. They are human choices, and they are available to each of us. In a world obsessed with outcomes and achievements, we often forget that depth begins in how we see. Leonardo saw more, not because he was told to, but because he chose to. He turned every moment into a question. Every detail became a doorway. What if we lived like that? What if instead of chasing greatness, we focused on becoming more awake? You do not need to be a genius to live a meaningful life. You only need the courage to be fully present with yourself. The path to inner clarity does not begin with information. It begins with attention, noticing how we feel, becoming aware of what we avoid, listening to what we long for. This kind of self-awareness is not selfish. It is the foundation of wisdom. The more clearly we see ourselves, the more gently we move through the world. And in that gentleness, we begin to heal. Leonardo's practices can guide us. Curiosity as a compass, observation as a mirror, writing as a bridge, stillness as a teacher, movement as medicine, integration as truth. These tools are not reserved for the elite. They belong to anyone willing to begin, anyone willing to ask, what is true for me? What have I ignored? What kind of life do I actually want to live? These are not grand philosophical questions. They are the beginnings of a return. In trying to become someone extraordinary, we often lose the person we already are. But there is nothing missing in you, only parts waiting to be seen. Leonardo's genius was not a spotlight. It was a candle lit in the dark, a light he chose to protect and nurture. You carry that same spark, not for the world to praise, but for your own awakening. You do not need to become someone else. You need only to come back to yourself. When society labels depth as a psychological problem, in many cultures, depth is misunderstood. If you think too much, they say you are overanalyzing. If you spend time alone, they call you withdrawn. If you feel deeply, they label you as sensitive. Slowly, society builds a story that being reflective is a flaw, that silence is suspicious, that stillness is laziness, and that introspection is a sign of weakness. But the truth is this: what looks strange to the surface is often sacred beneath. Leonardo da Vinci was not celebrated in his time for his inner world. His notebooks full of anatomical sketches, philosophical notes, and scientific experiments were not widely known while he was alive. His complexity was misunderstood. His intensity was questioned. Yet those very qualities gave birth to his genius. He was not trying to impress the world. He was trying to understand it. And through that effort, he left behind a legacy that continues to inspire hundreds of years later. Today, the same patterns persist. Many people suppress their inner lives to fit into roles that feel too small. They pretend not to care. They rush past wonder. They dull their curiosity. They silence their questions, all to avoid being seen as different or worse, broken. But depth is not dysfunction. Feeling too much is not a disorder. The ability to reflect, to question, to pause is not something to be fixed. It is something to be protected. We must begin to challenge the narrative that equates emotional awareness with instability. There is strength in reflection. There is power in solitude. There is wisdom in asking why. To feel deeply in a world that numbs is not weakness. It is a form of resistance. It means you are still alive, still open, still reaching for meaning in a time that often devalues it. Leonardo reminds us that what is hidden is not broken, that what is quiet is not empty. His life is a mirror for those who walk through the world feeling misunderstood. You are not alone in your depth. You are not lost in your silence. You are simply tuned to a different rhythm, and that rhythm, though quieter, carries truth. We must reclaim the space for inner life. We must learn to honor what cannot be measured, because in doing so, we recover something sacred, not just in ourselves, but in each other. The world needs more people who are willing to feel, to think, to see, and to remember that being human was never meant to be shallow. Awakening isn't about being better than others, it's about returning to yourself. Many people imagine awakening as some grand moment of enlightenment, a sudden flash of insight that separates you from the rest of the world. But true awakening is quieter than that. It is not a competition. It is not about reaching a higher status. It is a process of remembering who you are beneath the noise, beneath the expectations, beneath the fear. It is a return, not an escape. And it begins the moment you stop trying to be more and start allowing yourself to be whole. Leonardo da Vinci did not chase recognition. He followed his inner thread. He lived with questions, not to impress, but to explore. He allowed himself to be moved by wonder. That is the real sign of awakening. Not knowledge, but openness. Not certainty, but curiosity. In a world that teaches us to harden, to strive to conquer, Leonardo reminds us that the most powerful path is often the most inward. He became who he was not by rising above others, but by going deeper into himself. Awakening is not a finish line. It is a way of seeing. It is choosing to slow down when others rush, to listen when others speak loudly, to reflect when the world demands reaction. These choices are not glamorous. They are not praised, but they build a life rooted in truth. And in that truth, there is peace. Many people feel like they are falling behind, as if life is a race and they are losing. But awakening invites us to leave the race entirely, to realize that life is not about being first or fastest or most impressive. It is about being fully here, fully yourself. There is no prize for pretending to be someone else. There is no finish line for becoming real. Leonardo's legacy is not just about brilliance. It is about depth. His art, his notes, his questions, all of them were acts of presence. He lived close to the mystery of life, and that closeness gave his work its soul. You do not need to be a genius to live with soul. You just need to remember what matters. This world does not need more perfection. It needs more truth, more presence. More people willing to return to themselves and to each other. Awakening is not a path away from humanity. It is a return to it. And in that return, we begin to heal, not because we are better, but because we are finally whole. Leonardo da Vinci's life was not a blueprint for greatness, but a quiet invitation to live more deeply. His genius was not a destination, but a direction. And that direction is still open to all of us. You don't need to chase brilliance. Or your dreams. You only need to return to your breath, your curiosity, your inner voice. In doing so, you begin not just to think like Leonardo, but to live like yourself fully and truly.